The Brock Purdy story continues to get better and better. This past Sunday, Brock became the first quarterback in NFL history to win each of his 6 career regular season starts and throw at least 2 touchdown passes in each of those starts. He did that in the 49ers 30-7 drumming of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Purdy is also the first quarterback in NFL history with a passer rating of 95 or better in each of his first 6 career regular season starts, coming off a major elbow injury and against a team that we speculated could be good. How impressed are you with Brock Purdy?
I am very impressed with Brock Purdy, and it makes the giving up on Trey Lance thing, which I thought would have been asinine back in February, look really, really like a good idea here. He has been absolutely incredible, and this looks like this might be the peak San Francisco 49ers team this year. Brandon Ayuk had the incredible first game, and he's like the 4th most skill position player on that team. The defense held the Pittsburgh Steelers to 1 yard of offense through like 27 minutes of that game. Like, the San Francisco 49ers are ridiculously talented, and even if you believe Brock Purdy isn't ridiculously talented, he has just picked up right where he left off. He looks better in that offense than Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's going to get the 17-game sample size to really prove what kind of NFL quarterback he is.
You know, I'm not much on giving super hot takes, but at this point, I know limited sample size, but we heard this quote this offseason from Kyle Shanahan that Jimmy Garoppolo is the best quarterback that the Niners had since Steve Young. And in many ways, I kind of agreed with it. You know, like, I was very young when Jeff Garcia had his day in the sun. Alex Smith took several years to develop. Colin Kaepernick definitely had one of the highest peaks as well as a 49ers QB. And again, like, I love Jimmy's time in San Francisco, but when I look at Brock, it just feels different. There's just something about the guy. When I look at the 49ers offense, the stats are reflecting it. I mean, another 30-point game performance by the 49ers offense with Brock Purdy at the helm. Last year during Brock Purdy's starts, I believe they were averaging 30 points a game or maybe just shy of that, which was a tick up from the starts where Jimmy Garoppolo was. So when I look at Brock Purdy and I look at the stretch, I don't think a Niners quarterback has played this well in this offense, honestly, since Steve Young. He is just operating at such a high level of football that it's insane. And it makes sense, like, why a team that's loaded with all pros looked at this guy and said, yeah, we'll name him captain, because there's just so much alike. Like, the ball placement is there. Like, you saw that back shoulder throw he threw to Brandon Ayuk. That was perfect, on the money. There was a moment where you had a free blitzer coming off the edge. Brock Purdy read it, did a spin move out of the pocket, and was able to hit Deebo Samuel like 20 yards downfield on the run. Great throw, great catch. And another fantastic moment, just him scrambling for the first down. I want to say this happened in the second half, pointing at the camera and then calling out Patrick Peterson after the game. This guy's got all the confidence in the world. There's a reason he has the nickname BCB right now, trending. Go ahead and look it up if you haven't seen the nickname yourself. But yeah, at this point, I just don't know what's not to like about Brock Purdy. Again, you mentioned the Jimmy Garoppolo comparison. That's always going to be there. But yeah, the Niners just bet right when they bet him over Trey Lance. I mean, Trey Lance never looked this good.
It's almost as if they had more data than we had on who the quarterback was best for their system and who the locker room was most interested in being their franchise quarterback.
Again, I'm just going to put this out there again. I'm through with the Niners drafting in the high rounds. They seem to nail the late picks. They keep nailing the late picks, whether it's Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw in the 5th round, Fred Warner in the 3rd round, now Brock Purdy in the 7th round. Give me all those picks, because when I think about it, Solomon Thomas, a Mike McGlinchey, Trey Lance now, Javon Kinlaw. Yeah, I trade all of those just to have like what they have going on in the 5th or 6th round, 5th, 6th, 7th round.
Not to mention they traded a 1st-round pick for D Ford, right? That's a thing that happened also. So
2nd round pick.
A 2nd-round pick, that same point. But they gave up a high draft pick for D Ford, Solomon Thomas, Trey Lance, Mike McGlinchey. Even Brandon Ayuk wasn't looking great until a couple years ago, or at least last year. So.
I will want to dispute actually something you said earlier, that Brandon Ayuk might be the 4th most skilled position player on this team. I disagree. I think Brandon Ayuk's taken the leap. At this point, I think that he's a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel. George Kittle, it's hard to measure like with his blocking and his receiving prowess. So if I was to rank him, okay, maybe Christian McCaffrey 1 for sure, because obviously elite, top of his position type running back, and that was demonstrated in his run this past weekend. But then it's between Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle for me. I might give Kittle the slight edge just because of his position. I think he's within that top 3 of his position, which Brandon Ayuk, I guess you wouldn't say that he's in the top 3 quite yet. Could be. He has that potential. He has that wingspan, the speed, the athleticism to do it, but obviously he needs more opportunity, which, hey, if he keeps getting 8 receptions a week, the opportunity will certainly start to shine on the stat sheet. But I think he's 3. I think he's over Deebo right now at this point.
Well, let's mark it down here, everybody. The Juju, San Francisco 49ers fans disrespecting the great Kyle Juszczyk. Just absolute disrespect for a future Hall of Famer being one of the most talented skill position players on the Niners.
You know, it's hard to measure a fullback, which throughout the entire league is technically a dying position, but in the Niners locker room, it means more than anywhere else. So yes, I love me some Kyle Juszczyk, but this past week, heck, he didn't even have a carry. There's some weeks that Kyle Juszczyk could just not be seen at all on the stat sheet. Brandon Ayuk, his presence was felt. Again, I mentioned the fun dynamic between Patrick Peterson calling out Brock Purdy and saying that he's going to have an interception, and Patrick Peterson getting dunked on twice this week by Brandon Ayuk. That was beautiful.
Dude, in a week where Jamar Chase doesn't call Cleveland elves, this would absolutely be the top talking point of the week. Patrick Peterson goes on a podcast, talks shit about the 49ers, and then they essentially put him on a poster. Like, imagine if that happened in the NBA, where insert Patrick Beverly here is talking shit, and then someone just puts him on a poster. Like, imagine if something like that happened in the NBA. That's what happened with Brandon Ayuk and Patrick Peterson one-on-one for a touchdown. It was the most badass shit, and I felt like no one was talking about it because Jamar Chase kept calling Cleveland elves.
I mean, I think some Niners fans would be so brazen to post that on a poster. I mean, that was probably one of the best catches of Brandon Ayuk's young career to this point. I think still the top moment for him is whenever he literally hurdled a Philadelphia Eagles player the 2020 season. I think that Brandon Ayuk, his athleticism sometimes, especially when he goes up for jump balls, it comes off almost like an NBA player. I think we really are seeing the Brandon Ayuk breakout season, which kind of comes at an unfortunate time for the 49ers, just because his contract's up at the end of this year, so we'll have to see them roll out the Brinks trunk for yet another top-of-the-line player. I guess we'll see how much that contract comes out to.
It was so interesting there because they were saying in the offseason, George Kittle and the Niners players were saying, oh, Brandon's going to break out this year. Brandon's a top 5 talent. Someone said Brandon's a top 5 most talented receiver in the NFL. Like, they were telling us this was going to happen. And they came out in week 1, and Brandon Ayuk was the second best wide receiver in the NFL, only behind the superhuman Tyreek Hill. It's just kind of incredible. They told us it was going to happen, and then it happened the first week of the season.
Well, Brandon Ayuk's development is an interesting case study when you think about how he was obviously a first-round pick. The Niners traded up for him. They loved him in 2020. 2020 was the injury-riddled season from hell that befell the 49ers that year. So we had to work through quarterbacks like Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard that season. And then 2021 comes around and he's just nowhere to be seen in the first few weeks because he's in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse. That became a popular term around the 49ers that year because Brandon Ayuk was in the doghouse. Then in 2022, you start to see a gradual jump. Obviously his first 1,000-yard season as a pro. And here in 2023, it's hard to argue that he's not the wide receiver 1. And I feel like even on weeks in which Brandon Ayuk, because we saw this last year, even on weeks where he only has like 3 to 4 receptions, you're still going to feel his presence. They're going to be the most valuable 3 to 4 receptions you'll see on any team in any given week because he just can make an impact with them. And especially too, when you consider that the attention on this team, you can't just focus it purely on Brandon Ayuk. There's so many other things going on. Kyle Shanahan scheming guys open on these in-breaking routes. They're just unstoppable. I know people will make the joke going back to Michael Thomas of like slant boy, but like on these in-breaking routes, I just don't know how you stop like some of the Niners players like Deebo or Brandon Ayuk because Brock Purdy's, he's just hitting these with ease. And even when they're not there, he's finding the check down with all pro Christian McCaffrey right there to bail him out.
And they're able to do it even with subpar offensive line play, which I think is the most remarkable part of all of this is that the Steelers were getting pressure with 4. TJ Watt had a strip sack on Brock Purdy in the game. Like, the offensive line was not exactly holding up the way that they hoped it would, and it didn't matter because they were able to move the ball in so many different ways, whether it was with McCaffrey, whether it was with Ayuk, whether it was George Kittle getting a catch on a 4th down play, because when has Kyle Shanahan ever called a pass play on a 4th and short? Threw it to George Kittle and they converted it. It was so interesting that even with subpar offensive line play, according to all the advanced numbers, they were, and the basic numbers like pressures and sacks and fumbles, even with subpar offensive line play, they were still able to put all that together. The 49ers were the most impressive, second most impressive team of the weekend. It's either them or the Dolphins, because they were absolutely amazing.
Well, I got to give it to the Cowboys too on Sunday night. As much as it pains me, I got to give it to the Cowboys too.
Fair too.
They
That's
did.
fair too.
But you mentioned the offensive line. Yes, that is a point of concern for the 49ers. And you mentioned it didn't burn them this week, but mostly because they had such a huge advantage, because in a closer game, those turnovers, those strip sacks that TJ Watt was able to force, those would have been a problem. And the problem right now for the 49ers is Colton McKivitz. And I think if Colton McKivitz was just a backup reserve offensive lineman, he wouldn't be as big of a story for the 49ers. But the fact he's their starting right tackle, I'm concerned, like, whenever they go into matchups with other high-end pass rushers. Again, we're going to see Hassan Riddick again this season. We're going to see Micah Parsons. How is Colton McKivitz going to hold up against those guys? Well, he already is 0-1s, I consider, against TJ Watt. TJ Watt owned him this past weekend. So in those matchups, what do? You have to scheme George Kittle to be on that side to give McKivitz a little help. That's the only way I think you can really make that work. Unless, now here's a storyline to follow for the 49ers. They restructured some contracts. They restructured the contracts of George Kittle. They restructured the contract of Trent Williams. They restructured Eric Armstead's deals. So now the 49ers have the most cap space currently in the NFL with $40 million to work with. Are they going to make a trade? Now, I don't know if there's a trade out there for a right tackle. If there is, you got to consider it. If you're the 49ers, if you're John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, you got to fix this offensive line, because going back to the start, we mentioned Brock Purdy coming off an elbow injury. Why is he coming off an elbow injury? Because of pressure from the right side of the offensive line. Fix that right side of the offensive line, because that's the only hole you could point to on this Niners offense right now. Wide receivers, good. Running back, great. Tight end, great. Quarterback, trending towards being really good. When it comes to the offensive line, on the left side, great, good, okay, bad with Colton McKivitz. That's kind of like right now where it is. I think that that's just something that has to be a point of emphasis. If they have any trade chips to go, if they have any available players out there, fix the right side of your offensive line. That's going to do it for this recap of the 49ers versus the Steelers. Brock Purdy, again, looking really good. Let us know your thoughts. Like, how far can the Niners go this season? What do you think? Do you think Brock is going to entrench himself as the 49ers quarterback of the future? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias. From Juju and Kyle, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.